song says to us, Lord, open our eyes. Is that correct? Our eyes, or eyes of our hearts. Big difference between eye, the nature one, and the heart. If we can see Him through our hearts, there's a big difference of that. And this morning, as we continue in the series of Lamentations, I put this title on the chapter 3, part 1. We had a part 1 and we have another part, Hope in the Heart of the Dark. Hope in the heart of the dark. There are seasons in the human spirit when suffering ceases to be a distant concept and becomes an intimate companion. We have all been there, no one out of it, or we will be. These are the moments when the world feels dim, when our prayers seem to bounce off a brass ceiling and echo in an empty room. There are the days when the presence of God feels less like a present reality and more like a fading childhood memory. The book of Lamentations is usually a flyover book for most of us. Unfortunately, we do not like it because it is uncomfortable. Do you agree with that? Sometimes when we read it, it's difficult for us. In chapter 1 and 2, the prophet Jeremiah looks at the smoking ruins of Jerusalem, a nation destroyed. But in chapter 3, we have a glimpse of hope. The camera zooms in. The lens moves from the city streets to the interior landscape of a signal-breaking soul. The prophet stops saying they. He didn't speak for others, but he started saying I am the man who has been affliction. He said that. In Lamentations chapter 3, the prophet speaks from the center of his own suffering, not from the center of suffering of others. This is not just an idea. This is faith lived in real pain, a raw cry of a believer who feels crushed and abandoned. He feels as though God has broken his bones, shout out his prayers, and welt him in with no escape. He is not offering a theory for us or for the world. He is offering his tears from pain, from suffering. And this honesty is not unbelief. It is the sacred language of lament, as we said last time, the time before. The courage to bring the truth of our pain onto the presence of God, precisely at the darkest point of the book, hope emerges. Look at that. When you go back home, read this chapter carefully. Lamentations teaches us a profound truth. God does not always plant hope after the darkness has passed, but often right in the heart of it. It is the realization that while we may feel struck down, we are not destroyed. Think of that, pray for that. Yes, we struck down many times, but He is still with us. The chapter 3 carries us through a second progression from the valley of tears to the summit of trust. Look at that. We can see this. Honest lament, verse 1 to 20. And remembered hope, verse 21 to 24. And the last bit, which Linda had read for us, quiet trust, from 25 to 33. Look at that and think of it. Honest lament, remembered hope, and quiet trust. The first one is honest lament when the darkness becomes personal. That we have to come to the honesty with God. The chapter begins with some of the most raw and honest words in Scripture. The prophet describes a God who feels like an enemy rather than a shepherd. If you remember what Linda read, it is difficult words. It's not easy to read it from a prophet. It is not easy at all. The prophet feels crushed. Look, verse 4. He has broken my bones. He says that to God. The second thing, trapped. He has whelmed me, and so I cannot escape. It is difficult. He imprisoned me. He put me in, or locked me in. Unheard, He shouts out my prayer. How many of us experience this? The last thing is hopeless. My endurance has perished. Look, crushed, trapped, unheard, hopeless. The four these things is difficult. When we have difficult time, we come as the prophet was at that time. Look at this. This is not a legacy unto unbelief. It is a biblical lament. He said that. But he didn't accuse that for people to share with him. But he went to the presence of the Lord and he spoke to him. He expressed what he has in his life with the Lord himself. He didn't spread all the things around for people, but he went to the Lord straight away. It is the language of faith when the lights go out. We often mistakenly believe that God is honored by our stoicism, but the prophet demonstrates that God is honored by our honesty. Think of it. We do lots of things as believers, but we need Him to be honest with Him in our feelings. The question is, why does God allow such honesty? Look at this. Many believers think they must be strong for God. Pulpits all the time ask people to do this, but they forget Lamentations chapter 3 gave us an opposite thing. God is not honored by our pretending. He is honored by our honesty. God never hears what we hide. We have to express to Him. We have to share what we have with Him. Psalm 142, verse 1 and 2. Cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before Him my complaint. Before Him I tell my trouble. We have to. It's better than to say or spread our complaints to others. We have to come to His presence and share with Him. Lament is the doorway through which hope eventually enters. The prophet does not pretend. Look, we have three things here. He does not minimize. He does not offer cliches. He brings the truth of his pain into the presence of God. He does this. We need to do the same in our faith, in our heart, when we face problems in our lives. The second point is remembered hope. Remembered hope. Anchored in God's faithfulness. Verse 21 to 24. Look at this. Look at verse 21. We have reached to the turning point of the book. Lamentation, I mean. The exact moment as the darkness begins to give way. What the prophet says. But this I call to mind. Remember. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Notice that the prophet's circumstances have not changed. The ruins of Jerusalem are still smoking. Hope returns not because his situation changes, but because his memory it changes. His heart changes. He looked to him in a different angle. He sees God in different way. He deals with the situation, the pain and the bad situation in a different deal. He intentionally redirects his mind towards for uncheckable truth. Look at that. For uncheckable truth, what they are. God's steadfast love never ceases. That's one of the things we say that to people. We share with people about that. This is our faith. His covenantal love and commitment are not run out by his spiritual failure. Steadfast love. And steadfast love never ceases. The second thing, his mercies are new every morning. Every sunrise is a silent sermon, declaring that God has not given up on his people. Whatever in winter, whatever in summer, whatever in spring or autumn, he is with us in all seasons in our lives. The third uncheckable one is great is his faithfulness. Great is his faithfulness. It is not the strength of our great God that saves us, but the strength of his grip on us. Big difference. We hurry up to catch him, but most of the time we can't get his presence that is ready among us in our hearts. The last thing is the sufficiency of God, of the Lord. The Lord is my portion. The Lord is my portion, meaning he is the only inheritance I have left. When everything else is taken, God himself remains. Whatever happens, we have to experience that in our lives. Hope is not a denial of pain. By the way, I tried to do it summarized in Arabic in my Facebook page. I didn't say all of that, but I didn't. Man said to me in the morning, it is a long message, but I'll read it. He said that. Hope is not the denial of pain. It is not a feeling, but what? It is an act of the will. It is the deliberate reassertion of God's character in the heart of suffering. An unchangeable one. He is still as he is. The past and the present and forever. He is the one. We know him personally. The prophet does not say, I feel hopeful. He says, I remember. He recalled his heart and mind and the past for him with God. Because faith is not a feeling. Faith is a memory of who God is. A conscious choice to anchor the soul in God's unchanging character when everything else is collapsing. Think of that. The third point, which we come to the end here to conclude, verse 25 to 33. Quiet trust, waiting for the God, for the Lord of compassion. Waiting for the Lord of compassion. Waiting for him. After remembering God's character, that is Jeremiah, the prophet moves toward God again and he says, we read that, the Lord is good to those who wait for him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Verse 25, verse 26. For he does not willingly afflict or grieve the children of men. Verse 33. Again, when you go back, how we have to read that and think of it. In Hebrew, mindset, waiting is never passive. It is an active, expectant learning toward God. The prophet learns that God's silence is not his absence, and his discipline is not his cruelty. Big difference. In the quietness of the middle, God is carefully rebuilding the soul. God is carefully, in the midst of pain, midst of the dark, rebuilding our souls. We often try to rush through the darkness to find God at the end. The prophet discovers that God is nearer in the waiting than in the rushing. That was prophet. And I'm sure many of us experience that in their lives. The God who seemed far is working quietly, faithfully, compassionately. In conclusion, hope in the middle, not at the end. Hope in the middle, not at the end, if we are waiting for Him. Lamentations 3 is the center of the book of Lamentations. Hope is placed in the very middle to teach us a difficult but beautiful truth. God does not always remove the darkness immediately. Maybe do it, maybe not. God does not dismiss the depth of our pain. Yes, this is strange. And God does not hurry the heart's healing. He doesn't do all of that. I don't know why. But He is not. But look at this. Instead, right in the thick of the darkness, He plants a seed of hope that cannot die. So, when the world feels dark and God feels the far, remember this threefold path. The first one, speak honestly to God about the truth of your pain. So, recall intentionally what you know to be true of His character. Instead, wait expectantly for the God who remains faithful even when we are faithless. God still remains faithful for us. We will find, as the prophet did, that God is kinder than we imagined and nearer than we ever felt. Therefore, when the shadows lengthen, do not rush for the exit, but instead speak the truth, summon the memory, and lay into the quiet light. The darkness, this is the last thing I have to tell you about. The darkness is real. But it is not the end of the story. Why? Because the God of the middle is ready there. That is I have to end.